Hello everyone, it's Mike Levin from Mike Levin SEO. Tuesday, November 11th, 2014. Out walking Cecil. And I had a little chance yesterday to investigate the last phase of my OAuth 2 authentication work. And I'm at the point now where I am authenticating in implicit grant mode, which results in you sitting on a URL that has the authentication token in the hash mark component of the URL, which never gets sent to the server. And the server actually needs the authentication token in this case of Pipulate. And what I need to do is figure out how to get that token to the server on every subsequent action it needs to do. So it not only needs to reach the server, it needs to be made persistent for the session for as long as you're using the Pipulate product. And there's a few ways to go about that, and my first thought was, since I'm using the jQuery library anyway, I might as well just quietly grab the hash component of the URL using window document. It might be location hash or window document hash, something like that. But it's pretty easy to grab the hash component off of the URL using JavaScript, which means I could quietly send a request in the background over to the server and maybe cache it on the server. So I investigated session variables in Flask, the micro web framework I'm using with Python, and it turns out they've got session variables, but unlike the olden days of the web where session variables were cached on the server, which caused memory bloat, you use as much more memory as you have session variables times number of simultaneous users. Bad story. So the modern way session variables are handled is cookies, because cookies have become so reliable of late. And in Flask, the session variable even encrypts the cookie on the web browser. So I can't use AJAX because cookies are sent on the HTTP response header before the page is built, and you're already sitting on a built page with the URL sitting there. So I can't use a quiet AJAX call in the background to set a cookie, at least as far as I know. The state of the web might have changed a bit since last I did that sort of development work, but the much more reliable method is to do a redirect. And it's probably going to be JavaScript, because when you're sitting on that URL with the authentication token following a hash mark, I can detect the presence of that hash mark and automatically forward to a new URL where the hash mark is in the query string component of the URL as opposed to the hash component. And that creates that pseudo security hole of any network sniffers on the network could grab the authentication token. But this thing is mostly made to work against localhost, and even when not, even when you host it yourself on a server, it still is not the biggest security hole in the world. There will be, one moment when the authentication token is exposed on the network, but it has that moment anyway. The redirect that has the authentication after the hash mark is being sent over the network. It just isn't being sent to your application server. So it's one more moment of that exposed authentication token, but generally against localhost, so it's okay. And then that redirect will be sent to a page that detects the presence of the authentication token, sets the session variable with the Flask session object, and then I have a choice then of doing yet another redirect to erase the authentication token from the URL, or just wait for the next thing to happen, the next click to occur, which won't carry it along on the URL. So that's a long way of saying that this coming Friday I will finish out the OAuth 2 authentication part. It's a shame it's taking 2 Fridays, but the truth is how login is handled is actually such an important part of Pipulate that it deserves the 2 Fridays. This makes it a completely username and passwordless system, or at least nothing cached on the browser, nothing cached on the server, and it's the minimal exposure of login credentials possible with an application like this, especially considering the way it's being distributed in GitHub, where I can't embed OAuth 2 client secret into the code. There is one secret that needs to be embedded into the code, but it's the Flask application secret that's used for encrypting session cookies. And that's not the worst thing in the world. Everyone who downloads Pipulate, if it's concerned to them, could just randomly generate. Maybe I'll even use a random generator. Oh, but then I need to keep that cached. Well, anyway, you get the idea. That's what's coming up this Friday. I think through the problem during the course of the week on these morning Cecil dog walks, so that when Friday comes around, there's no thinking, there's no planning, it's just sitting down and executing the coding. And that's going to be my Code with Mike Fridays, with little sessions like this along the way to just sort of give you a preview to let you know what to expect. Thanks, and hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.